Well, everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film. And joining me this week is one of my best friends. We met second week of college in film club. It's my buddy Matt. Matt, thank you so much for coming on.
How's it going, man? Thanks for having me, like always. Thank you.
Absolutely, Matt has been a frequent collaborator, and actually, what was interesting. Pre-pandemic, we were going to start a monthly show called Welcome to the Wasteland, and we recorded 2 episodes. And then the world fell.
Yeah,
and then
went full snow globe.
Whoop,
Yeah.
reshaped things, and Matt's part of our movie club, which we'll be talking about Rashomon this month, which was one of Matt's picks, so that's exciting.
Woo! Yes.
But for this episode, we're going to be taking a dive into 1920s John Ford directed Just Pals. But if you haven't tuned into the show before, we have 3 segments. We have coming attractions, then we'll talk about the feature of the week, and have some recommendations to send you home with. But to get things started, for the weekend, weekend of July 12th, because July 14th is a weekend of Netflix releases and documentaries and such. But we all know who really is commanding that weekend, and his name is Tom Cruise, and his movie Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. And that is coming out Wednesday, July 12th, so that'll already be out, and I would have already seen it. And Matt, why are you excited about Dead Reckoning Part 1?
So I want to say for the past week now, instead of the trailer, I like on YouTube ads, I've been getting kind of like these maybe like 3-minute like featurette things. Have you been noticing that?
I haven't seen any of them yet.
Yeah, there's like these tiny random little like behind the scenes moments where they're talking about like a random stunt that they did. It looks fantastic. It was absolutely fantastic. When does Barbie and Oppenheimer come out in relation to this?
7/21/23. 9 days later.
Gotcha. Okay.
Which Tom Cruise is still mad that Oppenheimer has all of the IMAX screens starting that weekend. So, but from what I heard,
I hope they all play nice. You know what I mean? I hope everyone makes money. I just want everyone to win.
We need them all to win.
Yeah.
At this point, from what I heard, the CEO of IMAX is like, we're prioritizing Oppenheimer. Nolan films with our cameras. He promotes like crazy. But once Oppenheimer runs its course, we'd love to bring Mission Impossible back to be on more IMAX screens.
Okay.
So that's interesting. And then Tom Cruise started playing nice. Him and Chris McQuarrie went out buying tickets. They got their Barbie tickets. They got their Oppenheimer tickets. And then Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie went out and got their Mission Impossible tickets and their Oppenheimer tickets. But nothing from Christopher Nolan, Cillian Murphy yet. So still waiting on them to go out and play nice as well. But as of right now, I've been a fan of Mission Impossible since 1996. When the first film came out, I had it on VHS. Used to watch it a lot. Big fan of the original film. And ever since seeing Ghost Protocol in theaters, it really renewed my love for the franchise. And Mission Impossible Fallout is arguably one of the greatest action films of the 21st century. Yeah. It's up there with John Wick, Mad Max Fury Road. So I'm super excited for this supposedly darker, more personal story that's going to put Ethan Hunt and his whole team at risk. I love Rebecca Ferguson, Simon Pegg, Ving Rhames. We're getting Haley Atwell joining the crew in this particular one. And just from the trailers, it looks amazing. So many shots of Tom Cruise riding a motorcycle or running. Mm. I can guarantee you even more times than he did in Top Gun Maverick, which was about 8. Because we're keeping track during my bachelor party seeing it. I'm so excited. I'm a huge fan of the franchise. So, I'm probably going to be going Thursday the 13th that night, I would hope. I'm probably going to see it in Prime Theater at AMC Marlton because my go-to theater doesn't have IMAX or anything. It's an older AMC classic theater. But Mission Impossible is very exciting. And then, yes, another week later will be a very exciting weekend for Barbenheimer. Barbenheimer. But it's going to be an interesting July. June fell a little bit on its face in terms of the box office. So, all hail Lord Nolan, Tom Cruise, and Margot Robbie. See how things go.
It's weird that you would feel like some of these things would be like way more spread out. Like you would feel like Oppenheimer would come out in the fall. Maybe
Oppenheimer does feel like a fall movie.
Yeah, like maybe Mission Impossible could have came out. Like what came out in May?
Guardians.
Oh, okay.
And Little Mermaid. And Fast X.
Oh, okay, yeah, those are heavy hitters.
The challenge is that even pre-COVID, the summers leading up to COVID, so like it had to be at least 2016, 17, 18, 19. Every weekend it was a big movie, and they just eat into each other. And especially now with so many films that were backlogged because of COVID, they're all coming out now. And we're probably going to have a similar issue once the writer strike's over, where they're going to be dumping a whole bunch of content all at once, and it's a free-for-all. But overall, box office just isn't back where it needs to be. And
what's Spider-Verse doing?
Spider-Verse is the only big wide release of June overachieving.
Okay, that's good. That's what I want to hear.
I think it's number 2 at the box office this weekend behind Indiana Jones. And it's been doing a really, really good job so far. It's up to $607 million worldwide, which is, I think, close to double of what Into the Spider-Verse made. Okay. So, like, it's making a big splash. It's just everything else is not doing so hot.
Yeah, it is interesting when you think about kind of when these conversations about, like, movies performing. But it's also kind of like these, like the calendar and, like, when these...
it's part of it.
I almost feel like some of these studios don't talk to each other, and they should know that, like, certain things are going to be, like, incredible draws, like The Little Mermaid.
Well, Little Mermaid isn't even... Like,
oh, really?
It's made $550 million worldwide.
Okay.
When even Aladdin made, like, almost $1 billion. I don't know. It's tough. And from what I understand, Warner Brothers put Barbie on Oppenheimer's weekend on purpose.
Oh, so this is like... So they're playing chess.
They're doing revenge for Christopher Nolan leaving and doing Oppenheimer with Universal.
Got you.
And it looks like Barbie is tracking for twice the opening weekend that Oppenheimer is.
I saw like some other reviews saying that Oppenheimer is going to be like a horror movie. I don't feel
like that emotionally devastating.
Yeah, and also it's going to be like 2.5, almost 3 hours long.
It is 3 hours and like 6 seconds.
Yeah, so damn, yeah.
It's a long movie. Those trailers are intense, but how can you say no to Barbie? Like, it just looks like so much fun. But I'll be talking more about that next week on next week's episode. But our feature of the week is the 1920 film Just Pals, which was the first film that John Ford did with Fox Film Corporation. So that started a new relationship that John Ford had in his career. And this film focuses on Bim, who's more or less like some kind of hobo or somebody like lower class society in this town, and he pals up with a young kid who gets thrown off a train. And Bim's trying to court the lovely school teacher in town, who already has a suitor, some rich jerk from a bank. But things go awry when some money goes missing, some robberies begin, and the whole town points their fingers at Bim because classism. But, Matt, what were your general thoughts on Just Pals?
So, right before we hit the play button, my eyes looked at the year of release, and it's like 1920.
Yep.
What? So this movie is a silent film.
Yes.
With the title cards and everything.
Yep.
Also, I noticed that like every single title card had like the top on top, like the banner had a reference to Fox.
Yep.
So it was also kind of interesting, where it's kind of like they literally do not want you to forget who's producing this thing, but which is kind of funny. But what did I think of this movie? I thought it was good. I thought that the slapstick wasn't all over the place, overboard, but there were some kind of like tiny little comedic things. Mm-hmm. I thought that for a movie that it's either the looks on people's faces or the music, like that. Those are like the two prominent things that are gonna like elicit emotion. It worked. I don't watch silent movies. The last time I saw a silent movie, I think, was like Nosferatu. I think, and that was when I was in middle school. Yeah, with like the Timmy Turner, sharp Timmy Turner teeth.
Yep.
Like, I don't know, but this movie was good. Like, if I would hop on Letterboxd right now, I would give it 4 stars. Like, this wasn't bad. And again, the music, especially because I like piano music, I thought it was really good. Yeah, I really liked it.
This film is a 50-minute black and white silent film from John Ford. This is his 6th film that I've done on my show so far. And to be honest, this is probably my favorite. I feel like I was a lot more emotionally invested in this one. I really liked Bim. We got to learn about him. John Ford did a good job of utilizing close-ups and those like intimate shots for us to really understand where he's coming from, his feelings. And the actor who plays Bim did a fantastic job of emoting and being able to portray things. Now, this film wasn't as impressive from like other technical perspectives. Like, probably the most interesting thing that you'll notice is whenever a character is like really honing in looking at something, it'll use a circular framing device to show like, hey, I'm looking out eyes staring at somebody. And there's a pretty impressive jumping from a train stunt. So like those kinds of things stood out from a technical perspective, and there's even like a horse riding across a bridge scene that happened as well, which you gotta take into account. Like, this is from 1920. This is still within the first couple of decades of film, so a lot of these things happening are just impressive. It's Buck Jones played Bim, and I think he gave a really good performance in this film. And I'm trying to see if I recognize any of the other films. I do not. But you have a really good cast of actors who portray these characters well. I do think that the film got a little messy in its third act, and that's probably my biggest complaint about it. Is it just started throwing a whole bunch of storylines out at you.
I was worried because it was like, I wonder how all these loops are going to get closed, because
they did close them.
Yeah, it was like because what I thought was interesting when you finally figure out, okay, so who are the pals? Like there's this little kid, and then there's Bim, who's the
Bim and Bill.
Yeah, I guess
couple hobos.
Yeah, basically, yeah, essentially, yeah. And then it turns into the plot with the bank. On top of that, and then it also turns into like a different kid that was kidnapped, and then on top of all of those things, also the robbery, and it was a lot of stuff. But everything does neatly get kind of like looped and interconnected by the end. Also tell them about the thing you told me about the like the makeup.
Oh yeah, well, in early cinema, a lot of actors wear a lot of makeup. It helps you express yourself a little bit better on black and white. It was originally something they used in the theater because, like, you can't, if you're sitting in the cheap seats, you can't see somebody's face. You can't see what they emote, so they draw, like, with makeup and everything. But yeah, a lot of actors just used heavy makeup at this point, and you can definitely tell that Buck Jones is made up in the film. A lot of leads do that. There are some actors that might not have as much because, they have a ton of facial hair. You can barely see it anyway. But it's an interesting thing with early cinema, what you have to do to make the lighting work, the black and white to work, to really express yourself with the filmmaking. And really, in the end, the last 5 minutes or so, they really do wrap things up well. They do hit on each of the main points and kind of pull it together. And this definitely has the most heart and soul to it out of John Ford's early films that I've watched so far. It's 50 minutes. It's not a huge undertaking. And it moves. It moves pretty well in terms of it. And it has some interesting things to portray about classism. Because at the core of it, Bim is only guilty because he's poor. Everybody points the finger at him. And there's a really sad moment, too, where he takes the fall for something, knowing that they will come after him because he is the poor one, to try to protect the reputation of the school teacher that he is in love with. So it's interesting how they utilize those kinds of things. One other, you're watching an old movie and Matt pointed it out, how they have one black character who shows up for a minute.
I was thinking all right, the moment that I saw him, I was like, please either make this scene be, because it's 1920, so either make this scene be incredibly short or be as sensitive as possible. And to be honest, it was A, short, and B, it didn't have anything that made me kind of squirm in my seat. Aside from the word choices, it wasn't any slurs, offensive language. It's the interesting word choices that they gave that character specifically, which is, I guess, in the scheme of things, I guess that's the best that I could have hoped for in the 1920s movie. But yeah, definitely, I was like, oh my god, please.
The main saving grace is at least it wasn't blackface, because it could have easily been that.
Also that.
Which is interesting because there aren't a lot of black characters in these early John Ford films, but for the most part, when there are, they're actually black actors. Which is saying a lot, seeing as, this is, 4 years removed from Birth of a Nation?
Yikes.
So, it was a different time, and everybody was just outwardly racist. Kind of like today, in some ways. Also, unfortunately, 103 years later.
I'm hoping that guy got paid.
103 years. It would be very interesting to find out what most of these actors got paid. Because this was still the studio era of, they were putting out, they were filming, 10 movies at a time. Just, going on this lot, that lot, this lot. And it's interesting because, this film doesn't have as many, outdoorsy kinds of scenes that we get to see. In a lot of John Ford films, we don't get to see the mountains and the ranges and stuff like that as much. But it does feel like you're in a small town and not necessarily on a lot of a studio.
So actually, which actually makes me think. You can think a random question that I was thinking about when we were watching it. All right, so you've seen a lot of this guy's movies. You've seen many of this guy's movies,
yes,
previously. So, were there any elements that you saw in this movie where it's kind of oh crap, okay, that was something that I saw in kind of his later work?
It's the intimate close-ups to really capture some emotion, because there's one shot of Buck Jones, Bim, where he's in the doorway. Doorways play a big role in a lot of John Ford films, so it's also interesting that this happened in a doorway. He looks into the doorway and sees all the town folk trying to find the money from the school teacher, and he has the money, and you see this intimate close-up, and you can see reading on his face that I knew right away, he's going to take the fall for this, because you saw it all in the expression. There's a lot of great shots like that in The Searchers, which I rewatched recently, one of my top 25 favorite films of all time. There is a lot of intimacy in the way that he will put the camera up there to try to get some powerful and expressive shots of actors. And doorways are a big thing. A really big thing in his films. There weren't any horizon shots in this, so we didn't get to see that. And it isn't as much scope as some of his other films, but there's some pieces there that you can see that are going to pop up in his films later.
Got you. Yeah, I was thinking about that. Because I've never seen a single one of his movies. And obviously this guy is like influential because he's like 80 movies.
80 movies I'm going to be doing on this show.
Over the course
80
of
weeks.
Like 30 years. Like that's pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive.
He directed from the 19 teens to the 1970s.
Okay. he's like Scorsese. Well, Scorsese.
No, Scorsese's getting there.
He's getting there?
Well, think about it. 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2000 teens, 2020s.
Yeah. When is his movie come out? That's this fall.
October.
Right? Yeah.
Killers of the Flower Moon. I'm wondering if we're going to get some John Ford in it. It is a Western. Scorsese doing his first Western at like 80 years old.
Much respect.
Still making things interesting. Shaking things up. That little Marty. But
no, this movie was good. I think if someone wants to watch a quick movie and for them also to say, I want to watch a silent film, just let's see what happens. This was not bad. And also, I was thinking, in terms of like a story that had an adult and a child in it, I was thinking of The Last of Us. It was like a really random thing to think about.
Oh.
I was thinking about that. And The Mandalorian I was thinking about too. Oh yeah.
Which is a Western.
Yeah, also that, yeah.
So
I was thinking about that.
I feel like The Last of Us is kind of a Western too.
Yeah, very sure.
It definitely with zombies. With a lot more horrible human beings than zombies. If fungal zombies, whatever you want to call them. It's an interesting thing to see these early tropes because The Kid. Actually, when did Charlie Chaplin's The Kid come out? Because I feel like that kind of set the tone for a lot of these films to have like adult man and child,
like a mentor,
kind of palling around. Doodaloo, 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 doo. The Kid came out in 1921, so actually this came out shortly before them. So that's interesting, but that trope became a huge thing once Charlie Chaplin did it in one of his greatest films, so it's interesting. You see those seeds. But, on to our recommendations and our last segment of the show. Matt, what would you like to recommend to the wonderful folks listening?
I would recommend everyone go on Hulu or get someone's Hulu account information, and then please watch the latest season of The Bear. If you watch the first season, A, it's fantastic, and B, anyone that's seen the first season immediately probably thinks about that 7-minute monologue that like our main character Carmi does. This season, instead of it being like a monologue where it's kind of like, whoa, what they do in this season, I'm not going to spoil it. They load this thing up with guest stars, and they really give like all these people like a lot of like meat to kind of like scenes to chew on. It's fantastic. I think it's such great television. And also that too. Yeah. No, just this is a great show. Just text me when you watch it. Text me when you watch the season.
All over Twitter and Instagram, I'm just seeing The Bear Season 2 best show of 2023.
It's not
which
hype.
Is saying a lot.
It's not all hype, I promise you. It's like substance in there.
Because, we had The Last of Us, Succession Season 4, Shrinking, great show. So those are big words, and I'll be watching it soon. Excellent. I'm making my way towards it. As I say, I don't prioritize binge shows. I prioritize watching shows that come out on a weekly basis, and The Bear just happened to be Hulu decided that we're just going to drop the show for the whole season. So I'll be getting to it soon. But I do especially recommend that first season is great. It is such a great show, and it even has some interesting cameos, especially by his brother. That was a fun one. Now, I have not recorded one of these episodes in like 3 weeks, which also might be why my beard is considerably thicker than the last episode that I recorded of this. So I've definitely watched a ton since then. And actually, oh, you know what? I might actually have 4 recommendations to give, because usually I give 3: new movie, rewatch movie, movie off my watch list. But I can't decide between 2 movies that I have seen in theaters that are new that I want to recommend. One, Asteroid City, which is the most, like, Wes Anderson is just continually really digging into his voice and his personality and style as a director. There's so many more interesting and quirky layers to Asteroid City than the trailers even let on. The framing structure of the story is a lot more unique than you would expect, but the cast is impeccable. The production design and costumes are incredible. It's just top to bottom. It's such an interesting film. And there's one 3-minute scene that might have the best acting in any movie this whole entire year.
Gotcha.
There's one actress that pops up for 3 minutes and almost steals the whole entire movie. So it's a very interesting and quirky and offbeat kind of film.
How's the dialogue? Because that's a thing of his. The dialogue is
everybody now is leaning into the really dry delivery of dialogue and everything. It's snappy, it's quirky, it's fun, it's awkward, and all
awkward.
Well, a lot of his characters are awkward. Jason Schwartzman's character in it is definitely awkward that he's portraying. And it's interesting because his dynamic with Scarlett Johansson and this relationship that's building between those 2 characters is really interesting. Scarlett Johansson has incredible comedic timing, which is something I didn't really know about her, and then I saw her in this, and it's like, oh, she has layers, lots of layers. And also Jeff Goldblum plays exactly who you want him to play in this movie, and I'm just going to leave it at that. The other film new release that I saw is Past Lives, which arguably might be the best film of the year. And a lot of people it is. And besides I had a very fruitful 30-minute conversation leaving the theater and driving back to my friend Haley's apartment afterwards with my friend Haley and my wife sitting in the back seat talking about this film because it was so thought-provoking. And the way that it tackles friendships and romantic relationships and the complexities of them and how time influences our lives and our choices. It's such a dynamic film, and it's beautifully shot. The music is exquisite in the ways that it really brings the emotions to the forefront, and the 3 main actors in this are fantastic too. So highly recommend Past Lives. A24 keeps doing it. Hopefully both of them will be in a theater near you. Big rewatch that I did was Unforgiven, which go check out the Movie Club episode of the Development Hell podcast on, which it turned out to just be myself, Jim, and Kevin talking about it. But it was also one of our longer episodes because I really dug into it because it's one of my top 15 favorite movies of all time, and it is such a deep and deconstructive Western, kind of looking at the whole entire genre and really picking it to pieces, and has incredible performances, and Clint Eastwood directs the hell out of it. And the climax of the film is one of my favorite scenes in all of film. So, highly recommend. And this I just watched this morning from my watch list, which is Scenes from a Marriage from Ingmar Bergman. And this is a 3-hour condensed film from a 5+ hour television series, limited series that had been released. The film version got released in 1974, and basically it follows a married couple throughout the years, different places in their lives. This might sound a little familiar if you saw the limited series starring Oscar Isaac and Jessica Chastain on HBO, because that was a remake that came out. This one is a lot more 70s and a lot more Northern European. It gets a lot more violent. and uncomfortable in the ways that the tensions build between this husband and wife as they're somewhat thought to be happily married. Their relationship collapses, and then the awkwardness of years going on of them reconnecting, and should they be having sex every time they keep seeing each other. And it's a complicated relationship that feels so real. It's uncomfortably real, honestly. And then it'll probably make you insecure about your relationship, and then that film's really working, isn't it? It's a very interesting and engaging and challenging film. It's also 2 hours and 55 minutes or so, so dive on in.
Where can you see that?
It's on Max. But yeah, those are our recommendations. Matt, thank you so much for coming on. And first off, coming over and watching Just Pals, and then talking about it on my YouTube channel.
Yeah, dude. No, thanks for having me. Always, dude. Much respect.
And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.
Bye, guys.